Welcome back, MTG Joe here. Today, leading up to Bloomburrow release on July 30th onto MTG Arena, we are brewing up some standard decks, and today is going to be my take day one of mono green aggro. Yes, we are trying mono green. Rotation happened, Farewell went away, Wandering Emperor went away. We still have Sunfall, so we still have to be somewhat mindful of that, but I wanted to give this a shot, in part during early access, I had both the new classes, the new kind of Sega level up things, and they both really impressed me as well. I had both the new 1-drops. There's the raccoon that's a 1/1 trampler that gets bigger when you cast more raccoons. It didn't make the list because it's hard to keep that density, and I think that's a bad top deck. But we'll go over some of the new cards in here as well, kind of go through a sideboard. So kind of built it with best of 3 in mind, but definitely could be played in best of 1, kind of some tweaks along the way. With the sideboard, there's some cards because we don't really know what the meta is going to be like. You'll see a lot of 1-ofs in the deck. The intent there is to kind of give some thought of, depending on the meta, we might want this. Give it some thought that way there. But let's jump into it. And let's actually start with some of the new cards in the deck. And we're going to start with Pawpatch Recruit. We have a 1-mana 2/1 Trampler. With a offspring ability. So for those unfamiliar, offspring is basically kicker, everything is kicker variation. So you can pay this for 1 mana, you get a 2/1, or you can pay 3 mana and you get a 2/1, and then you get a token copy of it that's a 1/1. They both share the ability of whenever a creature you control becomes a target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, you get to put a 1/1 counter on a target creature you control other than that creature. So they kill your thing, they try to cut it down, you put a counter on something else. With the offsprings, they can actually target each other, which is kind of cool. So we have that in here. We also have a Keen-eyed Curator, this little trash panda. 2 mana for a 3/3. As long as there are 4 more cards types exiled with the Curator, it gets +4/4 in trample. So this could become a 7/7 trampler. And it has the ability for 1 mana to exile target card from a graveyard. So kind of that Scavenging Ooze style ability. Gives you main board graveyard hate. It's a mana sink and can just become a very large creature late game. So we have those. Those are some of the new creatures in the deck. And I'm going to go back to the creatures, but I want to kind of highlight some of these classes that we're going to be trying out. So Hunter's Talent is basically, at the core, the floor of this card is 2 mana. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature you don't control. So it's a fight effect, but it has some added bonus. We can sink 2 mana into it. Whenever you attack, target attacking creature gets +1/0 and trample 10 to turn. So, you know, a 3/3 can just be blocked by 1/1s all day, but now it becomes a 4/3 with trample, and it kind of just ups its effectiveness in the game. And then the one that kind of got to me on the top end, if for 4 mana, it's some sustained card advantage in this deck. So if we have a creature with 4 more power at the end of a turn, we get to draw a card. So it's a way in mono green to draw cards. We have to be creative in mono green to draw cards. So that's one of the card advantage. So fight spell, trample and power boost, and card advantage. The other class is Innkeeper's Talent. So beginning of combat on your turn, you get to put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control. Then for a green, we basically could give any of our creatures that are modified with counters on them, they have ward 1. So it gives some added tax protection. And then for 4 mana, basically if we put a counter on target creature, we put twice as many counters on it, which is kind of cool. This one, if we're more interested in 1 and 2, level 3's a little bit more, but if we have to, we can mana sink. So the whole thing with this deck was I wanted, if we didn't have, you know, we kind of flood out, we can use our mana effectively, given that we don't have creature lands necessarily, but it's just mana sinks. We want to feed the mana into the deck. Now, kind of going over some of the other creatures. Aloe Alchemist is basically, we could plot it and give another creature we control +3/2 and trample 10 to turn. At this core, it's a 2 mana 3/2 trampler. As much as possible, because we have ways to give things counters and make things bigger, I want things to inherently have trample if possible. Hunter's Talent can give trample, but if it has it by its base, it's good on its own. We have Bloated Contaminator. We're not necessarily a toxic deck. Does this work for... Oh, this actually doubles the amount of poison counters, which is kind of cool too. But with this here, we're basically going to proliferate our own counters on our creatures to make them bigger. So it's another way to kind of play that game. So Note Scout is a 1-drop that can help us hit a land drop early, or helps us play basically one fewer land than I probably would want to play in this. And then it gives us some utility there. It could get a counter, which plays into the counter themes of the deck. Flourishing Bloomkin. 2 mana, it's basically scalar, its power and toughness is equal to the number of force you have. So early game, it's a 2/2. Late game, it could be, a 5/5, 6/6, whatever it may be. So just scalable. We could disguise this, and then if we turn it face up, we search for 2 forests, reveal them, put one on the battlefield, tap one in our hand. I don't think we're going to be disguising it that often, but it's going to be more of a just threat, put it into play, it gets bigger, and then we can give it trample a couple different ways. We have the Keen-eyed, the Pawpatch, like I mentioned, and then Sentinel of the Nameless City, another 3-drop here. This was another one that I wanted to just play because it gives card advantage. The Vigilance could be good, offense, defense as well. There's Trailblazer, Outcast. We don't have enough creatures that are base 4 power that I thought would be relevant. And then there's like Pelucranos, but Pelucranos is just like a big dumb idiot. I wanted things that had like extra utility kind of paired into it. We're playing 2 hard-hitting questions just as another fight spell. Now, notably, I'm trying to do as many of my fight spells as deal damage as opposed to fight. The reason being, like if your opponent has Shieldred, the deal damage is much more relevant to kind of push through things like that. I think the Golgari deck will probably be pretty popular. The mana base, I went with Myrex over Mishra's Foundry. It just helps the turn we cast it to be able to color fix. We have like a lot of double pips and stuff, so I wanted to be able to consistently hit that. I think Myrex is better against like Sunfall decks anyways than Mishra's Foundry. Sideboard, just upping the number of hard-hitting questions for more fight spells were relevant. Myrex for the control matchups, anything heavy sweeper based. I want to have access to Myrex number 3. Just for the grindier games, we could just kind of sink mana. Nissa for the grindier games, domain style strategies. Obstinate Baloth for discard style decks. Even against the aggressive decks, we can bring this in as a way to gain some life. Now, I may very well just play like more Pick Your Poisons. This card's like super efficient at what it does. Blows up artifact, enchantment, or creature with flying, namely Atraxa. But there's this new card, Scrap Shooter. So it's a 3 mana 4/4 reach. And then if we gift the card, so we have to give your opponent a card. When it enters the battlefield, destroys target artifact or enchantment. I think this is probably just worse than Pick Your Poison because you have to give your opponent a card. I think it's also probably worse than Tranquil Furlback, which is just got a lot more utility, all things considered. So I included it here for like conversation's sake, but I don't think this would be something I'd play. I'd probably just play another Furlback or Pick Your Poison. I don't think we're really in the royal treatment. We're not really going to be focused on protecting creatures, but if you do want to have something that helps against like targeted removal, this might be something to consider like that. We have the Sandstalker Moloch. If blue black decks are blue decks or black decks or blue black decks are relevant, this is just a nice way to get some card advantage. A flash 4/2 is a reasonable attacker as well. Against like control, flash it in opponent's end step, you get some cards like that. Soul Guide Lantern is Graveyard Hate if that's relevant. And then, so we see out of the mono black decks from time to time Phyrexian Arena be played. My thought here is against the grindier decks, against Gruul, stuff like that, maybe Tribute to the World Tree. Just gives like your creatures either come in bigger or they cycle themselves, which could be relevant as well. With Farewell gone, it's more reasonable to try to play these like grind cards in terms of like enchantments where previously we wouldn't be playing those. So that is my thoughts on the deck. Welcome people's thoughts, opinions. I don't know how this is going to go, but this is what we do with day one. We want to kind of throw an idea on the board, see what could be reasonable in this new standard environment, and kind of go from there. If you do enjoy this type of content, we do have a stats-based approach each week for best of 1 standard, best of 3 standard, and all the other arena formats, where we look at Untapped GG, which is a companion tool that tracks user win rates up to like mythic rank. And we look at the statistical basis in terms of which are the best decks. So if you want up-to-date metagame each week, make sure to subscribe to the channel. We'll be dropping the stats as soon as they are available. Usually it takes about a day or so to start getting the first inflow of user data in terms of the stats themselves. But if you want to keep up to date with the latest, the hottest decks, make sure to follow and subscribe. Thanks for watching, everyone. Hope you have a great one, and happy foraging